All right, welcome into another episode of the Fortified Pod. This week we are going to be reviewing every single NFL game from week 5. Today is Tuesday, so the entire week is over, and we can go through every single game, kind of get my review of the game, but also some of these teams are going to be kind of, state of where they're at, where they're going to be moving forward. And yeah, let's get right into it. So I'm going to share my screen here, share, and then pull this up so we have a little bit of a visual. All right. Starting with Thursday Night Football. I know it was a little bit ago at this point, but we had the Buccaneers at the Falcons. I really think this was the Buccaneers game to lose. It was another good. We'll start with on the Buccaneers side. It was another good Baker Mayfield game. He's played very well in every single game this year except that Broncos game, but we're also learning that that Broncos defense is quite good, and we'll get into that a little bit later. The Buccaneers are also not fully healthy. They obviously missing Antoine Winfield, which is kind of the biggest piece. Another thing that they're missing is a couple of their wide receivers that are great depth in terms of Trey Palmer and McMillan. So I think that will only get better, and they're still without starting right tackle, who's very solid in Luke Gadecki. So from the Buccaneers side, I think they're going to be fine. They still might be my pick to win the NFC South right now, even though the Falcons are starting to look better. Kirk finally looked really, really good in this. My Darnell Mooney agenda looked amazing, other than his one big drop, but he overall had an amazing game. Kirk's starting to settle in. The Falcons defense just has no pass rush. I do like the secondary. I think these are honestly the two teams to beat in the South, with the Saints maybe being a little tricky, but I don't know. Overall, I feel like these two teams are very evenly matched. I think the Buccaneers getting some health back might be my pick. Just don't win this division. But I think there are definitely things to look forward to on both sides. If you're a fan of either of these teams, the weird thing about the Falcons is their inability to really get Bijan Robinson going. Um, I really recognize the talent of Bijan Robinson. I guess if we really want to get nitpicky, the one thing coming out that I really didn't see at first with Bijan, as a college prospect is I was kind of like, okay, yeah, he's really shifty, really quick, and his ability to change direction is some of the best I've ever seen, but he is missing a little bit of long speed, and like maybe in the NFL that'll be a bigger deal. Which is why I think that was like the one thing holding me back from being like, this is the best running back prospect ever. Um, but they still just need to use him so much more creatively, and I think just give him overall more touches. He seems like a type of guy he essentially every single time he touches the ball makes at least one person miss. And I feel like you only really get the big value of that if you give him a big workload. And it's like, why'd you draft him this high if you're going to give Tyler Algier 12 carries a game as well? I feel like they could just be leaning on that a lot more. Hopefully, we see that throughout the rest of the year. I think the Falcons, things have been a little clunky for them this year, and they've just been kind of winning in the end. And Kirk Cousins has honestly been a really clutch quarterback. Um, They squeaked by a couple wins early in this year, and now that they're kind of figuring it out, I think they'll be fine. It'll be them and the Buccaneers. That was kind of my take on the Falcons coming in, that it would take a minute to, come together. So for them to be 3-2 and now starting to come together, things are looking up, but I think things are also looking up for the Buccaneers. And I feel like this was really the last game. The Broncos game really scared me, but I was like, after this game, I feel really solid about Baker as well. So anyway, that's kind of the spiel on that game. I know it was a while ago. I actually one other thing. I know he had a big fumble in this game that really cost them, but Bucky Irving is so much better than Rachaad White. It's almost frustrating to watch Rachaad White run the ball because Bucky Irving is so much better. But anyway, moving on to Jets Vikings. So halfway through this game, I remember tweeting it out. I was like, how many more times do the Vikings have to just like dismantle a team for us to start like taking them seriously as the best team in the NFL? And as this game went on, the the defense on the Vikings, I'm just gonna start from their perspective, looked absolutely insane. Completely confusing. Aaron Rodgers, who's the least turnover prone quarterback maybe ever. Um, they get a pick six on him. I think they had 2 interceptions in the first half. Like just dominating. But the one thing, and the defense really did play really well the whole game, but once the Jets kind of like, I think Rodgers kind of figured out what was going on and he realized he needed to get the ball out quick. And then with tempo, I think that took a lot. If teams start on offense start to play fast, we saw this maybe a little bit in the second half of the Vikings Packers game. It kind of takes away from the disguises that Flores is implementing that's destroying everyone and has like a historically high or I guess low DVOA. I think the tempo really messes with that because, you know, if, Harrison Smith is going to be on the line of scrimmage and he's got to get back to, a deep third or whatever it might be, if you go with tempo, that just like throws the timing off of all of that and then probably makes these things easier to see. So we might be seeing teams kind of figure out this Flores stuff a little bit, which we like should have expected. Like you're not just gonna have the all-time greatest defense of all time and like be this good for an entire season. But I think Flores will adjust a little bit moving forward as well to stay ahead of the curve. But we might see that defense go from like number one best in the league, best of all time to like, you know, very, very good and still elite. Well, like that just might come down to earth a little bit. And then offensively, we're starting to see, the normal Sam Darnold. Um, and it's always, I was thinking about this, it's always tough when you're supposed to start taking a quarterback more seriously as like a very good player. Um, because especially when it's someone like Sam Darnold who has a history of, some bad football. Because it's like even the best quarterbacks have bad games. So it's like if Sam Darnold looks really good for 4 weeks and then on the fifth week doesn't look as good, you know, like, does that like clarify to you that Sam Darnold is who we thought he is and he's just isn't good and things aren't working here? I don't know. I'm not like quick to say that he's done. And I think at the end of the day, what we know about the system that he's in with the coach and the surrounding cast, the offensive line, the receivers, he's just going to be overall elevated. And they're going to be able to win games like this when he doesn't necessarily play well. Honestly, played, in my opinion, really bad in this game. Seemed like he was missing guys, bad throws. And the one thing about the Packers game was, yes, we started to see this bad version of Sam Darnold, but he also had a really good drive at the end of the game to seal it, where I was like, okay, like he started playing worse, but like when it mattered, he came through. The Vikings had a couple chances in this game to put it away and just like couldn't. And I think that was more than anything Sam Darnold struggling, and Aaron Jones got hurt, which definitely plays a factor. So I think the Vikings are starting to come back to earth a little bit. I think we're seeing that. They're also going to have a bye this week, which is probably helpful for them. But I still think they're going to be very, very good, and they're a playoff team, and they can contend for the division. I just think the Lions might be a little bit better, but I like the Vikings. It's like they've proved that they're very good, and I think they will be very good. But it's one of those things where it wasn't sustainable on both sides of the ball. Like it was just so good on both sides that you knew it could like it's gonna come back down to earth. It's just where is that level? That's what we're kind of figuring out. I still think the Vikings are very good. Um, they've, in my opinion, been the best team in the NFL. It's just a matter of what like we know they're going to come back down to earth because they're playing at such a high level. It's just where's that level, which I kind of just said, but I think that level still might be like top 5 team. That's where I think I'm at with the Vikings. Um, Still amazing outlook looking forward. From the Jets side, I guess we can start with the elephant in the room. They did fire Robert Saleh today, which does, from an outside perspective, like I don't know what's going on in that building, obviously. From an outside perspective, it's like, why? It's like he is a defensive minded head coach. You're bringing him in to run the defense, right? And you've had arguably the best defense in the league cumulatively over the last like 3 years. They had the worst offense maybe like ever last year and won 7 games because of the defense being so good. And this year they had a rough first game against a great Niners team in San Francisco in week 1, and then have been amazing since. I thought they looked awesome against the Vikings. The DBs even got flagged a lot, especially on Justin Jefferson. But I think even a lot of those calls were like iffy, where they played amazing against the Vikings and it could have looked even better. Like they could have like completely shut them down. Like this defense has been rolling since week 1. And so it's like, and the offense has been struggling. So it's like, why are we firing Saleh if he's kind of like holding up his end of the bargain on like his side of the ball? Why are we firing Saleh? And if 2 and 3 was like a fireable offense for this team, that's all in, like win now, all in. If 2 and 3 is a fireable offense, like I like if that was the real possibility that if Saleh was going to go 2 and 3, you're going to fire him. Like, why didn't you do this like months ago and come into this season with a different head coach that like ran the whole offseason program? Like, why are we doing it now? I believe they have a bye next week. So I guess it makes sense. It has to be that him and Rodgers are just like completely butting heads. And we've seen some like weird interactions on the sidelines and stuff. And like everyone kind of just like brushed that off as them both having kind of like odd personalities. But now it's like, whoa, like that doesn't seem good. Like in your most like win now all in season in franchise history, you're firing your head coach in week 6, and now you got to scramble and figure it all out and hope it comes together. Like, what team? Like, this team is trying to win a Super Bowl. Like, what team has fired their head coach week 6 and won the Super Bowl? Like, I feel like for one season, like maybe firing Saleh is the best move long term. Like, I know there's a lot of people have a lot of gripes to Saleh in terms of his game management and his like press conferences and throwing people under the bus, maybe just being a dick. Um, but for the Jets, all that matters is this season. And like, I feel like this has a better chance of making them worse than it does making them better. Unless it is literally horrible and like relationships are like on like they can't be repaired. Like that's like it has to be to that level, right? Like he's also a defensive minded head coach and the defense is not the problem. So I don't know. That is not good. And even in this loss, like I was almost feeling better about the Jets moving forward after this game. The Vikings are freaking good. We just went over that. And the Jets defense shut them down, played great, which is Salah's job, responsibility inside of the ball. And then the offense looked horrible in the first half. I'll tell you that, like putrid, which I think is more on Hackett and Rodgers' timing with the receivers and all that. But then they really figured it out in the second half, and it was like they're moving the ball up and down the field like really well. They're going with tempo. Um, Breece Hall looks horrible, just randomly. Um, the offensive line was not holding up against these pressure looks from the Vikings. But they're moving the ball, and Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are really starting to be on the same page, and like things are going well. And you know, when you put the weight of the world on one last drive, like you're gonna get variance, and Rodgers threw the ball inside, and when me and a lot of other people included seemed like that ball should have been up and outside to Mike Williams. But, that's probably more of like a chemistry, like not on the same page type of thing. And Rodgers wanted him to kind of box out Gilmore coming back into the inside and make a catch. But Williams was thinking it was going to be more up and outside to the sideline. And that just comes from them not being on the same perfect page. So yes, they had a loss and they were going into a bye. I honestly was like feeling pretty decent about the Jets. Like 2-3 is not ideal, but the defense is back and playing at an elite level like they should. And the offense was starting to figure things out a little bit, it looked like, at least in that second half. So I don't know. Firing him seems so weird, and all that like says to me is that those relationships are probably just gone, and that's what they needed. Um, I guess. Uh, so the decision is weird to me unless it's just really bad. Which is not, I mean, not good vibes in New York, but I guess now you just let Aaron Rodgers completely take over and essentially be the quarterback and the head coach, I guess. I don't really know what you do from here. Devonta Adams in that scenario is even more valuable. And I think that would help the Jets a lot. It would. All right, but that's too much time on that. Moving on to Bears and Panthers. I think the biggest thing from this is, well, I think the Panthers side of this is as quick as saying um, the defense is historically awful. They're terrible. Any team is going to have a get right game against that defense. Andy Dalton, you know, you can't really expect him to, come in and fix everything, even though he was playing pretty good before this game. Chuba Hubbard, really good. He needs more respect. One of the most underrated running backs in the league, if not the most. But they did suffer some offensive line injuries, and even though their offensive line was playing some of the best football in the NFL, that's definitely going to go downhill. Um, we'll probably see Bryce Young like start a game by the end of this year as well. Um, he came in and he made a nice throw on the run. It was really nice. It kind of just seemed like he bailed from a clean pocket as well. So I didn't like fully take that play as a positive, but like it's at least something that he was able to hit a throw on the run and it was a nice throw. From the Bears' perspective, their defense is really good. Gervon Dexter, however you want to say it, Florida product, looks like a big piece of that defensive line to go on with Montez Sweat and the secondary with Jalen Johnson and Brisker and everybody. Kyler Gordon looks really good. The defense is awesome. And Caleb, week by week, is getting a lot better. This is kind of his breakout game. It was kind of nice to see him finally go against, pretty poor defense and be able to just figure some things out. He had some great throws to DJ Moore, and he's really figuring it out. The Bears are a serious team, and Caleb is getting momentum. And they get Jacksonville. Things get a little bit weird when you go to London. I mean, we'll see what happens with that. But if they win another game and Caleb plays well, we could really start to see what we all thought Caleb was capable of. And it's really exciting because I was super high on Caleb coming into this year, just like really everyone. I know some people thought he were kind of on the extreme and were saying like, I don't think he's going to be that good. And they were taking victory laps after the first couple weeks, but he's really starting to heat up. And I think people are going to eat those words. All right, my favorite game of the week as a Ravens fan. The Ravens beat the Bengals in overtime. This game was absolutely insane. I think the major takeaway from a broad perspective of both teams is both of these quarterbacks are still amazing. The Bengals offense is firing on all cylinders right now. All of their weapons are full go. They have Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins on the field finally, like together, and Joe Burrow's playing amazing, and the offensive line is pretty good. This is probably the best, outside of those two main pieces surrounding cast that Burrow's ever had as well. In terms of Gesicki, Eric All, Yoshi Vaz, Jermaine Burton has honestly made a couple big plays this year. Two running backs that are decent. Maybe they're, overall worse than Joe Mixon, but the offense is insane. But this defense is awful. And I think we can all kind of, if we go back and look at their big playoff run to the Super Bowl, that was on the back of their defense. And I think this is just showing that how far this defense has fallen from grace, that the offense got better and they're an overall worse team. The Bengals, I mean, with the way that offense was playing, really should have won this game. They were up 10 at two different points in the fourth quarter. But from a Ravens perspective, last year, things really came together for the regular season to beat up on teams with the defensive personnel and, Lamar being like in a better drop back quarterback kind of situation last year. But now this year with the offense, not only did Lamar take a year to kind of develop in that drop back system, they now also with Derrick Henry have the option to still just destroy teams on the ground. and Derrick Henry adds such a higher upside to an already great run game. And Lamar's ability to now play a more traditional drop back passing game combined with his like Lamar won MVP last year mostly because he had a pretty good season and the Ravens just won a lot of games in a year where there was no real other impressive MVP candidates. Like that's only the reason he won. He's playing considerably better this year than he was last year, and I think could honestly, because of that, win another MVP. Like he played insane in this game, and they had every answer, and then they got one timely turnover with Marlon Humphrey at the end of the game. And then I thought for sure after they kicked the field goal with Justin Tucker, which was an insane kick with that much wind, by the way, that they couldn't stop Burrow all day, and I thought he would just easily go down the field and kick a field goal and win the game. But then they got to stop, they got a sack, and then force overtime, and they drove right down the field, and Lamar looked locked in, and I felt really good about that drive. And then the fumble was awful, and then they got really lucky with a bad snap hold, missed field goal, and then Derrick Henry ends the game. What I'm talking about with the Ravens, what I was kind of getting at is everything kind of came together last year personnel wise, and schematically on defense with McDonald, obviously. But I think this team actually has higher upside than the team last year, which maybe sounds crazy because they won so many games last year. But the Ravens were a great regular season team where like they still needed the perfect game script and everything to go well to win the game. Like if the game script went their way, they were going to just destroy teams last year, which they did. But if it didn't go their way, it was against a really good team, it was going to be, an uphill battle to, make your team win a game they shouldn't necessarily win. Does that make sense? Like they're much more built to no matter which way the game goes, if they're ahead and they want to pound the rock, they can do that. If they're behind, Lamar is now so much more fit to, drop back and throw the ball 40 times like he did in this game. The defense still has a lot of things to figure out. I think they were honestly playing like okay in coverage, but the Bengals playmakers are just simply better at the catch point. And Ja'Marr Chase was, you know, muscling Brandon Stevens away and T. Higgins. And then it's like, okay, like we're putting the ball up and outside to T. Higgins with perfect accuracy. And he's just got 4 inches on the corner. Like, what are you really supposed to do? So the defense definitely still has some stuff to figure out. Zach Orr is a first-time defensive coordinator. Like, it was going to take time, and the personnel's not the same. But the Ravens, when they won the Super Bowl in 2012, lost in the AFC Championship in a heartbreak to the Patriots the year before. Last year, they lost in the AFC Championship in a heartbreaker to the Chiefs. Could mean something, could mean nothing. But like I said, the Ravens' floor of this team is lower than the team last year because the offensive line was a little bit better last year. The defense was better last year, which are floor raising things. But the ceiling of this team, I think, is higher. This team is rolling, and this win was really symbolic of that. But there we go. All right. Texans Bills. I feel like I'm going a little slow, so I'm going to try and speed this up because there's a lot of football to get through. So Bills Texans. I think the Texans have not played perfectly this year, and they're still 4-1, and they're still beating good teams. I think they are legit Super Bowl contenders. I think Stroud by the end of this year is going to be like very seriously considered in that Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow tier. I think he's the next guy, and he's going to start being in that like, okay, there's Mahomes, and then like probably Allen, and then it's like who's really 2 through 5, and I think he's about to like enter that, especially with the connection with Nico Collins. And like I said, the Texans haven't even been playing perfect football on both sides, of the ball, but they're 4-1 because they have Stroud, who's just gonna be able to make plays when it counts, especially with Nico Collins, like I said. I don't know how serious the Nico Collins injury is, but they'll be fine. And I think come playoff time, they're like legit contender. And we need to start taking them like very serious as a Super Bowl contender. The Bills, my worries about the Bills before the season started are starting to come true. And the Bills are my hometown team. Like I'm a Ravens fan, but I love the Bills as well. Grew up going to Bills games, but because the Ravens are my favorite team, I feel like even though I'm a Bills supporter, let's say, Bills fan, I can be more realistic with them because whenever it's your favorite team, you always just like err on the side of optimism, I feel like. But for the Bills coming into this year, I was like, you have Sean McDermott, who I think is a good coach, maybe not a great coach. And you have Josh Allen, who is elite. And then you have a whole lot of average for the rest of the team. The receiving core has some pieces and is like good, not great. The offensive line is good, not great. The D line is good, not great. It's good. The linebackers are good, not great. The secondary is good, not great. So I was like, if you combine, you know, Josh Allen, who's elite, with a good coach, and then, an average surrounding cast, like, there's no way you're going to be bad. You're going to win 10 games, give or take two. I think the Bills will probably win 10 or 11 games. That was my prediction. But I was like, when it comes down to, playing the elites of the elites, the top tier teams and players in the NFL, I just don't know if they have the horses. Like, do we really think the Bills have a number one shutdown corner to run with Nico Collins? Clearly not, because freaking one drive into the game, he was scoring an 80-yard touchdown. And he's elite. So this was my big worry with the Bills, and then the offense really struggled, and they did find a way to fight back, and almost win this game, but it looked ugly, and it looked like they were completely outclassed for the majority of this game. I do think the Nico Collins injury did play a big role in that. Um, but after 3 weeks, I was like, maybe the Bills looked like they took a step back on paper, but they looked so dominant after 3 weeks. And maybe they just were really ahead of the curve in building this team that's going to dominate in the too high version of the NFL in terms of running the ball and quick passing and, good defense and running quarterback. But the last 2 weeks were their big tests because, they played the Cardinals, the Dolphins, where they were killing the Dolphins, but maybe the Dolphins weren't as good as we thought. And they also obviously lost Tua, and I don't. The Dolphins are kind of like in the same boat of like they have a lot of good, but not a lot of great. I mean Tyreek Hill, but who did the Bills play week 3? The Jags, who we've seen have not been very good this year. So they hadn't really gone against a great like elite like team. And they go against two potential Super Bowl contenders and look outclassed, which was kind of my worry. I'll be rooting for the Bills, and I still think they're going to be a very good team this year, and I still think they're going to win 10 games. It's just, come playoff time when you're only playing the elite of the elite, I just don't know if they have the horses right now. It's still a little bit of a retooling year, even though they'll still be really competitive. But yeah, that's my take on that. Colts, Jags. I predicted that the Jags would be horrible this year and that Doug Peterson would get fired. So I've just been kind of waiting for that to come true. And that prediction looked pretty good after 4 weeks. They did sneak this one out. Joe Flacco honestly played amazing. I made a video about it. If he was like 32, he'd probably be like looking for a huge contract. That's how well he's played the last 2 years. He's still like turnover worthy prone, but like he's so aggressive that like it kind of works. Um, but yeah, I mean, good for the Jags getting a win. Still think Trevor Lawrence can be good, but I think the organization is kind of killing him. Trayvon Walker had his best game as a pro. That was good for them to see. Tank Bigsby looks insane. Brian Thomas looks insane. My early draft takes on him were very wrong, but to be a little bit fair to myself, I did really warm up to Brian Thomas. Like come draft day, like I was very low on him and then I rose on him a lot. But where he is now, like still like he's been so good that I still consider my take like wrong on him. And And I guess I'll leave it at that at the Colts. Like their season's kind of just like on standby until Richardson comes back. Patriots Dolphins, I might skip this altogether. It's just like the worst, most boring game ever. The Dolphins desperately need Tua back to have any type of, hope this year. I don't really know what's going to happen with that. Patriots side of things, it's sounding more and more like they're going to start Drake May, and I feel like their hand is being forced because they have lost 4 straight, and like there's all these like rumors swirling around like Mayo losing the locker room, which sucks because they had such a great win week 1 and like vibes were high, and now I think winning solves everything and losing ruins everything. That's the other kind of flip side of that. Like I said, the saying goes, winning solves everything, but losing ruins everything. And they had high, vibes after week 1 and like looked like they might be a little bit of a frisky team with like a good culture, and now things were going south. And like watching Brissett, he gets murdered every play, and I really don't think putting in Drake May, like you might be destroying your most valuable asset. You might be Bryce Younging him. I think he's a really talented, good player, but it's like, God, like that is scary. Um, but I also kind of see where they're coming from because it's like you're losing the team. Like if you're being like very, very objective about it, like a change at quarterback and putting Drake May in and hoping he's the savior is like your only chance of being like actually competitive this year. Even though Brissett's probably better right now, but like you don't know. Like May's a mystery box at this point. But it's like, God, like this was my whole thing with the quarterback rankings is my rankings went Caleb, and then I had Penix at 2, and then May, and then Daniels. And I liked all 4, but my kind of I think I technically had May at 2, and then Penix, and then Jaden Daniels. But like my whole thing was that uh Penix was going to be more successful because I thought because Penix would be more suited to play right away, and May wouldn't be, and May was going to go higher and be forced to play earlier in a bad situation. So that was kind of like the thing. I thought like Penix would be better right away, and that would help his career. And then, so essentially, I went Caleb, May, Penix, Daniels, but the people we'd be talking about in 10 years would be Caleb and Penix. Because I really like Penix. Daniels, who I liked as a prospect, I just like the other guys more, has just completely blown me away. And by putting him at 4, I almost already feel wrong because he has looked insane. And we'll actually get into that in the next game. But yeah, overall, I'm just really worried about Drake May coming into this situation. And I guess I'll leave it at that for that game. But Browns Commanders. So I'll just keep going on the Daniels thing. I had my QB4, still liked him. I didn't think that was necessarily a huge knock on him. I did not see this outcome happening. He looks amazing. I wanted to pump the brakes on him because the Bengals and Cardinals defense and defensive scheme against him were so bad that I was like, okay, like he's going against the Browns with an elite pass rush. They blitz the most, I think the most in the league coming into this game. I was like, this is going to be a very completely different test. Like, not saying that he hasn't been great or that he's necessarily definitely going to fail, but like temper your expectations because he's about to have a very different test. And early in this game, I actually thought I was right. He was like 50% completion percentage. He had the one like broken play bomb, which was a great throw to Terry McLaurin early in this game. But then he immediately throws a red zone interception. And I'm like, yeah, see, like he's been great. And that's a testament to him, but he's going to get a very different test. And he's kind of graduated to the next level of defenses throwing stuff at him. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. But then he just kind of figured it out. He started running the ball a little bit more because there was more lanes being more man coverage. And he still made great throws down the field when he got the opportunities. So he passed that test. I will say the Browns are kind of a dumpster fire right now. Like, I hate to keep sounding like a Daniels hater and all this, but I do think the Browns kind of like on paper their defense should be like elite. And I think because Watson is so bad, it not only is your defense just on the field way more, which hurts, it's kind of like the mental aspect of like, okay, yeah, we got to stop, but our offense is about to go 3-and-out and to lose 10 yards of field position. And the overall, like every game, it's like, dude, like we'd have a better chance than Jameis. Like, what are we doing? And I do think that weighs on a team after a while. And they've just been through years of this at this point. And like the defense should be playing at a higher level. So he passed the next test with flying colors. I will say that. Like it looked a little shaky at first, but he passed it with flying colors. Next week is the Ravens. And, you know, I think as a team, that's going to be the hardest test yet by far. First of all, the Ravens defense did look vulnerable last week, but I still think like I feel like I sound like such a hater of Jayden Daniels, but I feel like still temper expectations. If he passes this test, then it's like he might be CJ Stroud. The Commanders might be Super Bowl contenders. If he looks great and they beat the Ravens, this is the test. If they do that, there's no reason for me to not say like, yeah, he's elite. Like there's nothing to say about it. It's like Stroud last year. At some point, you were like, yeah, he's really freaking good. And this team is really freaking good. I still think the Commanders are showing that they're a great team. The defense is, shaky, but when your offense is that good and they're like never punting, like your defense, as long as they're not like absolutely horrible, like the Bengals, like you're kind of fine. I do think the Ravens are going to be way too much for them next week. I will say, I am a fan, and I just said it's hard to be objective about your favorite team. But I think everyone else, I think the majority of people would agree with what I'm saying. That the Ravens are by far the best team they're playing against this year because they played the Buccaneers, who they didn't look that good against. The Giants, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Cardinals. And the Cardinals just beat the 49ers, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but they just like only sent 3-man rushes against him, and they have an awful pass rush as it is. Like, yeah, I don't know. If the Commanders, I'll just say it again. If he looks really good and they beat the Ravens next week, like I'm ready to put them, you know, top 5 in the NFL. Like that, like, yeah, there's not much to say after that. Okay, which I was not like that's the best story in the NFL by far, by the way. Very wrong about Jayden Daniels. I thought he would struggle at first because I thought the offensive line was gonna be really bad. Um, which I still don't think their offensive line is great, but I think he's just been so good that it mitigates it, which I didn't really see happening. Major testament to him. He's awesome. Okay, Raiders Broncos. The Raiders need to trade Devontae to the Jets, first of all. They still have a quarterback problem. I'm not an Antonio Pierce believer. I think he's kind of just like an idiot and just kind of like lucked into the spot he is and like got the team to ride around him for a little bit. And now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're not actually that good though. That's the problem. And they're just kind of like screwed with no quarterback now. I would have loved this team if they had Michael Penix. That would have been sick. I really wanted that to happen. Brock Bowers looks great, but yeah, I gotta find a quarterback. Um, I feel like for whatever reason, this team is like destined to have Shedeur Sanders. Is that crazy? I don't know. Broncos. I really like the trajectory of the Broncos right now. They have an argument for the best defense in the league. It's been the Vikings, but the Broncos defense is sick. Their defensive line is awesome with especially Zach Allen breaking out, who is a guy I really liked in the draft, and he kind of fell and then kind of out of Boston College, probably because he's not the greatest athlete, but now he's been dominating, especially when he gets kicked inside on passing downs. And then Pat Surtain and Riley Moss have been amazing. Vance Joseph has been dominating. I made a whole video about how they have been an elite, elite, elite defense. And Bo Nix has been struggling to throw the ball down the field. But I honestly loved seeing him yell back at Sean Payton because you know that if he's a rookie and he can yell at Sean Payton, it'd be one thing if he was like a 5-year vet and he was yelling at Sean Payton. That would almost seem like, okay, they just don't have a really good relationship and they don't like respect each other, maybe. But when you're a rookie, like like if you yell at your coach, who's Sean Payton, who's like disciplinarian, whatever, like you guys have a like good relationship and you're yelling out of like because you both really care and you're passionate, but it's like almost like seems constructive. And it's like Bo's not gonna like turn away with his tail in between his legs and lose confidence. And this is probably the best I've seen him play. I guess he looked pretty good in the Buccaneers game, but it was kind of like still like Sean Payton holding his hand. And if you give Sean Payton an elite defense, like I feel like he is the perfect coach to just like if you have absolutely nothing, like he'll scheme up 13 points, 17 points. And I mean, and then if you have an elite defense, then you're just like in every single game. And Bo Nix, I think, is getting better. He's starting from like absolute rock bottom baseline, but I think he's getting better. And I like that like competitive fire. And I like the trajectory of them because their defense is so good. They're just going to be in every game. If like the other team is going to score sub 20 points, like you're just in every game. And now they're 3-2. Pat Surtain can win Defensive Player of the Year if they like sneak into the playoffs with 9 wins. It's pretty sweet. Like I didn't think they'd be that exciting. And I don't think I like they're like that exciting to the point where I like want to watch them really bad either. It's just like cool that their defense is this good. And you know, they got a rookie quarterback who's like getting better. Um Raiders, if you could sum up this game, it's Raiders and Broncos like oh, like could be good. Cardinals, Niners. Niners, I'm not really worried about them. I think Brock Purdy, when I've watched him this year, honestly looks really good. Um, it's kind of funny that he was like the poster child for like system quarterback because the system is so good and he was, you know, the last pick in the draft and supposed to be untalented. He's actually like really athletic and can like really create out of structure. And I feel like I didn't want to believe that at first when I like when he first started playing games. Like I saw him move around and he'd do that like half spin out of the pocket and stuff, and I'd be like, that's not normal for like someone you think that like went undrafted. Um, he actually is really good out of structure. So I'm kind of worried about their defense a little bit. Um, but I actually really like the outlook of the offense because Purdy's playing really well, in my opinion, even though some people think he's playing bad. Um, I think he's just showing that he can create more outside the offense. Ayuk's starting to get going a little bit. You know, Jordan Mason had the big fumble. If they can get McCaffrey back, that's obviously going to be a boost. I think they'll be fine come season's end, but like they got to start winning. Um, like you can't be 2-3, 2-4, 2-5, and then be like, oh yeah, it'll all be fine. Like at some point it catches up to you. Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are all year are just going to be like, you don't know what you're getting every week. Like the defense is so untalented that it's either the only way they stay in games is if they get really lucky with like some big plays on defense. And the offense plays really well, or just like the offense goes nuclear and they win in a shootout. But if you don't get an elite offensive performance and or a couple like big lucky plays on defense that like their defense looks awful for, 50 like out of 55 plays, but on 5 plays they do something really good and force 2, 3 turnovers. So I think it's just like you just never know what you're gonna get with the Cardinals. I think Kyler's great, and yeah, that's really it. Packers Rams. I think the Packers like have a Super Bowl ceiling for sure. I think Love just needs to like get his feet under him a little bit. I feel like he's kind of like pressing a little because he's coming back from the injury. He's like rushing back from the injury, and he's like trying to prove like, yeah, I got this big contract. I got a great like second half of the year this year. Like I'm good. Like look, I'm good. And it's making him like force throws down the field that he's capable of making, but it's like not the smartest. Um, but I think like at some point he's gonna really settle in with the floor and just like pick up where he left off because he's just really talented and I think he's got a good feel for the game. I think he's just pressing a little bit right now because he's like, okay, like I gotta prove that I'm worth this contract. I didn't play that great in the weird like week 1 game, and then I got hurt, and now like I need to show that I'm really good. And like I said, he's just kind of pressing. The more concerning thing to me is the defense. It's like, why do the Packers not have a good pass rush? Rashawn Gary looks awful. Van Ness is like whatever. Preston Smith is whatever. Like it should be better. And now this is like you fired your defensive coordinator and hired a new guy to get like more out of the like talent that you really do have on defense. And it's like they haven't been that good. They've been able to force turnovers, but I don't think that's like sustainable. Like Xavier McKinney's not gonna have a pick every week. Um, but yeah, I still think the Packers have a Super Bowl ceiling, and I think they could figure it out. Rams, you're 1-4. Like it's so tough because they were like an overall like not good roster with like really bad holes, especially on defense. And then, but they have like superstars where I was like, their stars are so good that they could beat anyone. Um, and like if they get hot, like there's just nothing you can do about it. Like if Stafford is getting, good blocking and Cup and Puka are healthy, like they're like I don't really care who the defense is. If he's playing well and he's hot and those guys are healthy, I don't care who the defense is. Like they can score a touchdown on every drive. And then it's just okay, the defense is bad, but can they like scheme up a few stops and then like, catch the Rams on a bad day? Like they can beat anyone. They could go on a playoff run if Stafford's really hot. But now it's like the offensive line is so beat up. Cup's hurt, Puka's hurt. It's like, and they still were like in this game, which goes to show what I was talking about already. But it's just like, God, now you're 1-4. Like you need these guys back so bad. They had good timing on the bye week, I guess. Hopefully they can get Cup back after the bye, maybe. Um, yeah, they're kind of just like it's starting to get to that like, is this too big of a hole? And if it's too big of a hole and you end up going, 1-6, 1-7, like what do you do? What do you do? I don't know. Like how much time does Stafford have left? Do you just reload for next year? Do you try to, you know, I don't even know. I don't even know what you try to do. That's tough. All right, Giants Seahawks. So I really thought the Seahawks were going to win this game, and I even bet on them -6.5. I was like, okay, Giants no Malik Neighbors. Seahawks, I can get them under a touchdown. Um, but what I failed to really think about, which I'm really kicking myself for because I feel like this is something I've been talking about all year, is that the Seahawks interior offensive line is maybe the worst in the entire league, and the Giants have quite possibly the best interior defensive lineman in the league has the capability of being a nose tackle and ruining a game. And that's exactly what Dexter Lawrence did. And I'm also a Brian Daboll believer. And the Seahawks got beat up by the Lions, and Jared Goff completed literally every single pass. So I'm not saying I like should have bet on the Giants, but I think I should have like recognized those things a little bit better and been like, okay, I want to just stay away from this game. I did feel pretty decent because the Seahawks looked good against the Lions. Um, but I think I wasn't even considering like how much Dexter Lawrence could like literally make this a non-functional game for the Seahawks because their interior O line is so bad and Lawrence is so good. Um, so yeah, that's the big thing is that was the major mismatch in this game, and Daboll is still a great offensive mind, and he's probably going to keep the Giants from being like horrible this year, which is cool. I think that's cool. But I really want the Giants to get Jalen Milroe because I think that's a really good fit in terms of his athletic ability and the QB run game that Brian Daboll likes to use. He could sit for a year behind Daniel Jones still. He gets an electric weapon that he's kind of used to at Bama in Malik Neighbors. And I think he would just provide a leadership that they're kind of really missing, especially from their quarterback. So that's kind of a tangent, but I think they should really try hard to get Jalen Milroe. Cowboys Steelers. I really thought the Cowboys were going to get run over in this game. Because their offensive line is not that good and they can't really run the ball and coming into this game, and the Steelers defensive line is maybe the best in the league, maybe they have one of the best defenses in the league. And they are trying to run the ball and the Cowboys can't stop the run. And then it was a rain weather game and I was like, okay, like this just seems like the way the Steelers are going to win. But Dak made enough plays and Fields did not look very good. And that's kind of a recipe for disaster in the normal scheme of a football game. I mean, this game was really close. It came down to the very end. Um, Steelers D line and edge rushers are freaking insane. Shout out Wisconsin with TJ Watt and Nick Herbig, and even Keanu Benton on that D line. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this was just the epitome of two teams that are good and should beat bad teams, but are but both have big enough flaws that keep them away from being like teams that are for real. You know what I mean? Where they're gonna win 8 to 10 games, but kind of like the Bills. I mean, I think the Bills might be like a step above these guys, but like I wouldn't guarantee a Bills win against either of these teams at the same time. So these teams are kind of just like good teams, but like their flaws are too big to overcome to like go on a deep playoff run. That's how I feel about these teams. And then Saints Chiefs, I mentioned the Jaguars thing, how I predicted them to be really bad this year, and I've been right, I would say, so far, even though they just got their first win. My other prediction was that the Saints would be really bad because I felt like they just had like nothing going for them. And then that prediction looked horrible after the first 2 weeks, and now they've lost 3 straight. Um, and I still think they look like better than I would have expected, and they're dealing with a lot of injuries, and their offense is more explosive than I ever would have thought it would be. But they are kind of like they haven't looked that good over the last 3 weeks. Started with that Eagles game, and then they lose a heartbreaker to the Falcons, which they really shouldn't have lost, to be fair. The Falcons got really lucky on that muff punt touchdown, and then like screen pass that got batted into the air, and they ran back for a touchdown, and then they kicked a 59-yard game-winning field goal. So I mean, and now the Saints like really kind of just got beat up by the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt looked pretty good for the Chiefs. They got that run game going a little bit. The offense looked more creative for the Chiefs. We're gonna see. Like last year, I was like going into the playoffs, like, yeah, their defense is great, but like, where are the playmakers? Where's this offense gonna come from? And they figured it out, obviously. And I think the defense is still really good. So there's that. And come playoff time with a great defensive game plan, you can win any game. So the Chiefs are still the Chiefs. But it's gonna be interesting to see how that offense plays out. Um, Worthy's a piece. Juju honestly looked pretty good other than that drop in the end zone. And it might be time to like actually start using Travis Kelce. But I mean I want to say the Chiefs look worse than last year, but it's like, do they? Like, I feel like this is the same type of team that entered the playoffs last year, and then it's like, okay, well, now we have probably the best coach in the league and the best quarterback in the league and the best defensive coordinator in the league, and we're gonna, perfectly game plan against you. And then, oh yeah, by the way, we have, the best quarterback in the league when it comes to crunch time, and he's gonna make the plays that he needs. And he has a tight end where they have the perfect mind meld connection where they're gonna know where each other are gonna be, and they're gonna make a play. So, I mean, three peats, not something you should predict, but and I'm not predicting it. But they still look great, and it's going to take a lot to beat them from anyone. So, yeah, that is a full review of week 5. I'm not sure how long this was, but I definitely had a good amount to say on every game. My goal was, I think I mentioned it in some other videos, especially with Tag as well. I just couldn't work with him this week. Didn't work out. Um, just timing wise. But I'm trying to get one like sports podcast out a week. So thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna stop the share right here. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, tell me how dumb I am for some of my takes. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.